I'm really delighted to introduce my friend I would say first, and colleague, Mandy Haggith, from Inverness College UHI. Mandy is a polymath. We've actually stuck that on her computer on the Inverness campus. Because Mandy started life in artificial intelligence, but she's got many varied interests in the arts. She's a poet. She's a very successful novelist as well. She's very recently had The Walrus Mutterer, The Amber Seeker and The Lyre Dancers published. I think sort of, did one come out each year for the last three years or so, Mandy? So she's got really wide-ranging interests. She teaches on the creative writing degree. She teaches on the literature degree at UHI. She also works with forestry and has been involved in an ABC tree project to do with the Gaelic tree alphabet. She's got obviously really strong interests in ecology. And Mandy and I are collaborating at the moment to come up with an Inverness College UHI creative arts strategy, which actually chimes very much with what Anna Wendy was just talking about, because we have a lot of colleagues in creative arts in Inverness who are active practitioners and would like to understand or get more support, if you like, in thinking about how that creative practice then can be aligned with their teaching and research ultimately as well. So Mandy's very involved in that. And I'm looking forward enormously to hearing about her InverU exhibition project, which sadly, obviously, has not happened, but we'll hear all about it today. So thank you very much, Mandy. I think Mandy's going to talk for about half an hour-ish, and then we'll have questions at the end.
Great, thank you ever so much, Leslie. Am I audible and visible? Great, so yeah, I'm going to tell you about an exhibition that is not happening. Well, it is going to happen in the future. It is postponed rather than cancelled. But as a poet, I've had a really exciting opportunity to have a solo exhibition at the Sawyer Gallery in VU, and that exhibition is called Trees Meet Sea. And because it's not happening live, this is effectively a little preview of that exhibition when it will at some point become possible for the gallery to reopen and for the exhibition to go ahead. So what I'm going to do now is, as Leslie has said, I'm a poet and novelist, but I have very much broader interests than that. Although I work in Inverness College, I'm actually physically based and speaking to you now from Assynt in the Northwest Highlands. So I'm right on the shore of the Minch. I live on a 24-acre croft, which is mostly woodland, and it's right on the shore of Loch Roe, which is a sea loch on the edge of the Minch. And so where I live is where trees meet sea, and that's the theme of the exhibition. And what I'll do in this talk is, first of all, kind of give you a little bit of background as to what my thinking was and how this exhibition has come about. I'll then give you some pretty pictures and read you some poems and hopefully give you a flavour of what it's all about, and hopefully that will be reasonably pleasurable for you. And yeah, this is much more a kind of arty seminar than an academic one, I guess. But I'll conclude, and what I would really like is if this session is interactive, and if you've got thoughts and questions, I'd really like to hear them, because what my aim was for this exhibition was to be the beginning of a process of conversation with other creative artists in UHI, certainly in the Highlands and Islands and beyond, about the liminal zone, about edge zones, about boundaries. And so for me, this whole idea of where trees meet sea is all about trying to explore the metaphor of the shoreline where trees meet sea as a metaphor for other boundaries and edges in society and in our lives, some of which might be very personal, some of which may be very political. Anyway, so I really welcome any of your thinking and ideas or expressions of interest in taking this conversation further. So hopefully this will be the start of something rather than a sort of end in itself. So I'm going to show some slides, and I will share my screen now. And I'm conscious of the fact that this sometimes takes a little bit of a while to it's a bit of a time lag. So what you should at some point, and I'd appreciate a shout when it actually becomes visible, see the title slide of the presentation, which has on it a piece that I have made, and I like being playful in the work that I do, and so this is, I think of Trees Meet Sea as it's visible, great. I think of Trees Meet Sea as a 3-line poem, basically 3-word poem. And what I did here is make it. The trees are made out of bits of tree, nuts and cones and things, and meat is made out of stones from at the shoreline where they're washed by the tides twice a day, and sea is made out of seashells. And the piece, this would be the title piece of the exhibition, and it is made on a big chunk of a washed up wrecked boat. So it's kind of a bunch of semi-rotten wooden timbers that it's made on. So yeah, I'm a sailor as well as being a tree hugger, and I find the sea is a highly productive and creative place to be. And in fact, the novel trilogy, which Leslie mentioned, I actually wrote most of that at sea over several years. And at this time of year, I would, in any normal year, be spending a lot of time sailing. Of course, I can't at the moment, but you never know. Since Nicola's announcement, maybe there's sailing in sight. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start with a little bit of background and show you a piece that I made last year, which is a poem called Listen, Feel, Wonder Under. And it was installed on the floor. It's very big, it's more than 2 meters wide. It was installed on the floor of the Sawyer Gallery at Inverview Garden last year as part of an exhibition with a group of artists, because I was part of a team of 6 artists in residence during the course of 2019, and would have been a part of a group of 4 artists over this year and next year, and hopefully that will come about eventually when lockdown eases sufficiently. So this piece, it was really exciting for me to be a poet amongst a whole bunch of other artists of different disciplines, and this piece was created in a participatory process. One of the things that I do with one of my other projects, the AB Tree project, is I do lots of interactive events where I get people to write on paper leaves a word or a phrase that expresses something to do with their relationship with trees. And this piece came about as a result of a workshop about oak trees, where I got participants to listen to trees and write a response to that, to think about, wonder about the trees and express something on that, and also to express how trees make them feel. And so you'll see that the 3 words listen, feel, wonder are themselves made up of little paper leaves, and so each of those is actually a little kind of collective micro poem in itself. And then Under is a poem that I wrote, which is a kind of non-linear kind of hyper poem about tree roots, and the whole thing was installed as a floor piece underneath a big totem pole in the gallery, hanging from the roof of the gallery, which was a kind of collective collectively made totem pole with lots of images on, led by Anne Kuma, the sculptor. And so this process, it was really exciting for me and kind of got me out of my comfort zone and got me experimenting and being playful with words completely unlike the kind of conventional text on the page where I've been for really a lot of years. And the other main piece that I did as part of that residency process was an oral piece called A Songline, which was done jointly with Dorji David, who's a storyteller and singer and songwriter. And that was a kind of improvised poem with refrains that was composed while walking a route through the garden and intended to be listened to while walking that route through the garden. And it's in three parts, with an opening movement and a long slow movement, and then a quick fast movement at the end. And in between the movements, the walk takes you to 3 benches in the garden where you can sit at the edge of the wood looking out over the sea and listen to a story that Dorji Chandra tells you. So both of these are examples of, for me, a really exciting collaboration with artists in other art forms and really blurring the boundary of what counts as poetry, I guess, in any kind of conventional way. And I'm interested, I'm really excited to carry on with those sorts of processes, as well as writing ordinary poems. So I got the wonderful opportunity to have my own solo exhibition, and wondered, well, how do you do that? I mean, a poet, you can't just stick a bunch of poems on the wall. So I thought about that what would be nice would be to actually form the exhibition of paired works, where with a poem paired with an artwork, either one that the poem was one that I had written in response to that artwork, or an artwork which had been made in response to one of my poems. So the exhibition that has resulted is 14 pairs of poems and artworks, half of which are effectively tree poems and half of which are sea poems. And one of them, which was, part of the fun of all of this was that one of the ideas is that I would actually have a presence in the gallery, in the sense that I would leave my wellies, and like all good West Coasters, I wear yellow wellies, of course, leave my wellies and my seaweed back basket that's made of willow that I go down to the shore and fill with seaweed for the garden, and leave them in the gallery as a kind of presence, symbolizing me. And the poem that goes with my wellies is called I Have My Yellow Boots On to Walk, which is a line from a W.S. Graham poem which set me off, and I'll read that now. I have my yellow boots on to walk down to the sea, the grey cloth ruffled and crummy with little boats. I have my yellow boots on to sink into the walking waters, submerge and find the world just as it is. I have my yellow boots on to follow in dead men's steps, to where the old engine rusts at the shore. I have my yellow boots on to wander out to where waves spume, gannets dive, fulmars soar. So some of the poems are poems that already existed before the, in fact, most of the poems are poems that already existed before the exhibition was conceived. This is a poem that I actually wrote last year in response to this etching by David Sandon, who was a Scandinavian artist who was artist in residence at one of the periods that I was also in residence at Inview House last year. And it gets me to one of those boundaries, those edge zones that I explore in my poetry, and that's the big edge zone between life and death. I realized that one of the things that I was doing at Inview was kind of going through a part of the grieving process for the death of my mother, and her favorite thing in the world, well, possibly not thing, but her favorite plant in the world, and she was a botanist, was the tree ferns, the New Zealand tree ferns. And this is this etching is of a Dicksonia antarctica tree fern that David made, interestingly, in response to a poem which was written by a previous poet in residence. So there's a kind of nice kind of continuity in what's going on here. And so the yeah, so this is a poem both for me and for David. Is it you I hear here in fern shade, showing me how the stump has grown from scales, each fanned and fallen year etched so we don't forget? We won't forget. I come and go with my weakening grief. You reach out from a hockey stick trunk, unfurl a fiddler's joie de vivre, let work drop away. You drop away below. Here light is caught, sequestered, treasured, shared in silver-backed shadow. I hear your voice. Better get on. See how we shall carry on. Follow the guiding arrow of a frond. So as I said, once the idea was hatched that the exhibition would be formed of paired poems and artworks, and really one of the things that got me thinking about it was the fact that I had already written several poems in response to artworks by artists in the Northwest Highlands. And so two of them are here. The one on the left is Lottie Glob's gorgeous Book of the Sea. And the one on the right is a green bowl by Fergus Stewart. And I love ceramics. These two pieces seem to be, to me, speaking about time. Lottie Glob's piece, she makes sheets of clay that she writes on and creates pictures on from things that she gathers at the seashore, and then puts them all together into a book, and then bungs it in the kiln and fires it, turns it into stone. And there's something about the works that have an idea in them, which is, they seem to somehow contain all of the history of the ocean in them, and the deep past is there in the book, in a kind of held in a sort of timeless way. And I'd written a little, and actually a little tiny miniature poetry pamphlet in response to her, to that work, one of which I'm lucky enough to own. And the green bowl is, it's wood fired and salt glazed, so it contains in itself both trees and sea, and the poem I wrote about it is about the future. It feels to me as though it contains secrets, and if you lift the lid, then the future will happen. And to me, there's one of these crucial boundaries where creativity happens and is essential for creativity, is the boundary of the present moment between the past and the future. And at the seashore, that temporal boundary seems to come into sharp relief, because the seashore is where the ancient sea washes the land and perpetually changes it, but it's also where we can see climate change most vividly. And the changing sea levels globally and the impacts of increased storminess and so forth represent, I think, for me, that boundary between what we have done to the environment in the past and what the future may or may not have in store for us. And so, yeah, so these pieces somehow speak to that. The next, there's a third ceramic piece in the exhibition, which is a subset of a large installation called Soul Vessels by Kirsty O'Connor. It was originally at Taikiersaba over in Lochmaddy, and it's an utterly beautiful collection of these little fragile ceramic boats made on the traditional Paris boat form, and fired in seaweed. And they are explicitly a kind of a memorial for people who have died in the Mediterranean as refugees fleeing in little boats. But it also speaks more deeply about death and our transition to whatever happens beyond death. There's sort of tones and ideas of Viking boat burials and the boat across Hades and wherever. It's enormously evocative, and I'm really pleased that some of those boats will be making their way across the Minch from Loch Maddie over to Pugnu, and I really wanted them and this painting on the left, which is by Peter White, and there's a similar one in his exhibition, which is currently hanging in Inverness Museum Gallery, and hopefully at some point some of us were there at the opening, and it's extraordinary. Hopefully everybody else will be able to see it again soon, and it's been moving around. Many of you have maybe seen it, yeah, so I sort of felt that these two pieces talk to each other, and the boat by Peter White is one of the examples that I've actually written a poem for the artwork, really for this exhibition, and so I'll read that one now. This is a very short poem called Vessel. This hold can carry heaviness or light. This displacement of water by wood and air can replace you if you choose no longer to remain here, held by the painter. And that poem was partly a response also to a conversation that I had with Peter about the idea of pairing poems and paintings, which is something that he's done a lot of, and he works a lot with poetry, and the fact that as people come into the space, they would see the painting. It's a big painting. They would see that first, and only when they get close enough to be able to read the poem that's beside it would they be able to encounter the poem. But that hopefully in encountering the poem, they would perhaps come away from the painting seeing it differently. And one of the things that happened when the exhibition couldn't go ahead at the beginning of this month, lots of people said to me, well, why not have a virtual exhibition? And Ian Mackay, for example, is doing a fantastic job with Art North, putting on virtual exhibitions. And Talis Solis in Liverpool has likewise done a wonderful job with a virtual exhibition. And I thought long and hard about it, and I decided in the end that I didn't want it to be virtual. So this process is really a kind of one-off preview. And one of the reasons that I didn't want it to be virtual, is because these and the next two pictures, which are both responses to tree poems of mine, these for me symbolize why you need to come to the Sawyer Gallery and see it when it opens. The painting on the left is by James Hawkins, and the painting on the right is by the picture on the right is by Jan Kilpatrick. And although they look lovely on the page together, but as the photographs just can't do justice to the reality of what's there. The painting is done in acrylics, and it's highly textured, and the light and colour bounces off it in extraordinary ways in reality. And the picture on the right is made of textile, and it's soft and it moves, and it's full of a range of different textile textures. And what I've realised is really important for me about this exhibition is that it is a mix of text and texture, and that textural aspect and the spatial physical aspect of it that will happen in the gallery is simply not conveyable in a virtual form, I don't believe. A really important part of what's really important about it to me will be lost in a virtual rendition only. So I'm really hoping it will go ahead eventually. So here's another example of that, these two pieces, the one on the left is Hawthorne Man by Chris Goodman, and the piece on the right is Wind Dancer by my three artist in residence colleagues, Dorji Candra David, Anne Coomer and Lynn Bennett Mackenzie. And they're both pieces that you need to see physically in the space to have really any appreciation, well, to have a real appreciation of. And Wind Dancer in particular, you can see it's dancing from that tree, but in the gallery space, it will hang and move, and you'll be able to touch it and feel it and smell it, and it'll bounce as people come in and out of the door, and it's great fun actually, which statically kind of loses a lot of that mystery. And then here, this is one that I haven't actually yet met. This is an otter made by Helen Dennerly. I'm still longing to actually meet it in person, and yeah, again, and to cuddle it. Yeah, really looking forward to seeing this piece in real. And then there are yeah, there's a video by Bill Ritchie, my husband, which is called Reflections on Loch Roe, and that will again, I think, produce an atmosphere in the gallery through having the light and effect of rippling water in the space, and it's a very direct response to the place where I live, where we live, where the trees come down to the sea, and it's got seabirds in it and the rippling shadows of trees. And the picture on the right is Cathy Sutherland's response to my poem Low Water, which goes as follows. As the tide drops, it becomes self-evident that it will continue falling forever, exposing more and more mud, weeds, rocks, and what has been submarine forever will become shore once more. So that tidal zone is, and all its contradictions and paradoxes and interests is I think, waiting for us to tap it for ideas and for inspiration. So my final slide here is really an invitation to you to think how that liminal zone might be a metaphor that speaks to you about other edges and boundaries. So the ones I've already touched on, for example, human relationship with nature, the current moment between past and future, and the climate change climate change as a kind of fulcrum of that. Also that issue of life and death, and perhaps very poignantly at the moment, given the virus situation, wellness and illness. For me, it's also an interesting blurred boundary that I'm passing through go through the menopause between youth and age, and that kind of shifting tidal movement speaks volumes to me about the way in which that transition is happening. But I'm also interested in this sea and shore boundary and blurring it. As you can tell, I'm interested in the blurring of boundaries between poetry and other art forms, also between the arts in general and sciences. So my work on the AB Tree project, blending and blurring the line between literature and forestry is just part of a wider interest that I have as somebody who's got a PhD in a science subject, but also works as a creative practitioner in the arts. I'm really interested in educationally trying to encourage us to blur those interdisciplinary boundaries and help scientists to be creative and help artists to understand science. And I'm, as Leslie mentioned at the beginning, part of a really interesting conversation that's going on in Creative Arts Group in Inverness, and I'd love it if I can be part and to help to stimulate that conversation more widely in UHI and beyond, about the boundaries between, and it gets called artography, which is the study of the boundaries between art, research and teaching. And those of us who are creative practitioners, who are also using our creative work as a form of inquiry and also teaching, and seeking to find a balance in our lives between this hybrid identity of people who need both to help our students to build their craft, and I use that word very deliberately in its double meaning, and also needing to sail our own craft on our own creative ocean and plumb its depths and have time and space and well-being to be able to be valid creative artists in our own right, and not allow our teaching to kind of somehow overwhelm that identity, and to have an existence within the university where we are recognized for all of those elements of our work. And I think, and that's a political issue, and I'm very well aware that it's a political issue. And I have a grant proposal in at the moment, waiting to see whether I get some funding to explore that through conversations with other creative academics. And of course, one of the things that I've been reflecting on in recent weeks is the way in which the tidal zone, the liminal zone, is also a metaphor that we can maybe help us to reconfigure and think through the ways in which the boundaries and connections between ourselves and other people are having to change as a result of COVID-19. And the separations that are happening between families, and the ways in which social distancing is changing our everyday behaviour. I think I've noticed, for example, when I go to the shop, that there's the tide is quite an interesting metaphor for the way in which we kind of have to move up to the counter with our basket and then step away while the shop assistant comes towards the basket, and we ebb and flow through shops in ways which are different from the ways that we have done before. And I think that as lockdown goes on and eases, then perhaps this could be a fruitful metaphor for thinking about that issue, among others. But for now, that's all I have to say, and except to finish by thanking from the bottom of my heart all of the artists who've shared their work for the exhibition, and also let me use shots of the work today. To everybody at NVU Garden who's been so fantastic in hosting us all there, particularly I want to name check Adrian Hollister and Lynn Bennett Mackenzie, and also Kevin Frediani, who made it all possible when he was at NVU, and who's now at Dundee Botanics, and I'm looking forward to taking the exhibition there when eventually we can do that. And thanks finally to all of you for coming along today and listening, and I'll be interested in any questions and comments.